Welcome to Balor Otherworld. I'm your host, Balor. My real name is Tommy, but I work under Balor, spreading the stories of Irish folklore, mythology, and history all across the world. You might have seen that a few years ago during COVID, I was focused primarily on short videos in Ireland, going to the locations where the events take place and recording on the site. The last couple of years, I've been focused on tourism and education and working in visitor centres. So I haven't had the time or the skill, to be honest with you, to do the videos direct to YouTube. There's been big demand for it though with my live audiences, so I'm starting back. This week onwards, I'll be trying to do one video a week. And what'll really help sustain me is if you can subscribe, if you can share the video, if you can like and comment. The more engagement, the more I'll be able to do, and the more I'll be able to invest in improving the production values as well. I also have a Patreon where I have a couple of videos and I have a couple of more that have been filmed and are just being edited at the moment. So enough of that, guys. I'm going to dive into this week's story because I hear an awful lot of people when I'm on the cliffs of Moher or on the Aran Islands, and they'll be asking me about the Banshee. They'll have seen the film The Banshees of Inisherin, and they won't be any wiser as to what a Banshee actually is. Now, there's many tales of a Banshee. Some will have you believe that the Banshee is an evil spirit that attaches to a family and haunts them. Her scream one night per year will call, it's a calling card, making sure somebody in the house won't make it till dawn. Another is that the Banshee will knock 3 times on your front door. This is a signal that somebody will not make it till dawn. So that knocking on the door is more common the further north in Ireland you go. But it's all different evolutions of a very similar story. I'm not for these darker iterations of the Banshee tale. I don't think they do her justice. So I'm going to tell you today the story of the Banshee's comb. Now, you might have heard of it, you may not have. Anyone in Ireland who grew up nowadays, who'd be over the age of 65 or 70, will have been told as a child, never ever pick up a comb or a brush on the street that doesn't belong to you, or if you don't know the owner, because if it does belong to the Banshee, she'll follow you home. As is the case of a man called Jack, who a couple of centuries ago in the village my father grew up in, he found himself encountering a Banshee, and he did not heed the warnings when he was a youngster. So diving straight into the tale, when Jack was an adult, he was heading home after the pub. Very unusual for an Irishman. I know this is a folklore, a fantasy tale. You'll have to bear with me. Suspend your disbelief. An Irishman walking home from the pub. As he was heading home, he had to cross over a stone bridge. On the left-hand side, there sat a beautiful woman combing her hair. She was a delight to behold. He had never in his life seen a woman as beautiful or as enchanting as her. Needless to say, he was shocked, and he couldn't pass up the opportunity to pay her a compliment, because if she gave him a wink or a smile, he would dance and skip the rest of the way home. He'd be delighted with himself. So he thinks for a moment, and he thinks up a beautiful compliment for her. Now at this point, she's just ignored him. She's just combing her hair, minding her own business, and he crosses over the bridge and he pays her a beautiful compliment. Now he doesn't expect any more than a smile or a wink, because Jack had a child, or Jack had a face that would make a child scream. So he pays her this compliment, and even the flowers around her blush in the dark, and she looks right past him. She doesn't even acknowledge him. Jack feels all embarrassed, humiliated in fact. He knows it'll be the talk up in the pub tomorrow night, and he needs to make sure he gets some sort of reaction from her. So he's walking backwards and forwards, and she is paying him no mind. And the more times she ignores him, the more times he tries, the more humiliated Jack is feeling. He stops. He's out of breath. He's looking over at her, and she's still looking past him as if he doesn't exist. And he decides he's going to get her attention one way or another. He waits for her to finish combing her hair beautiful and silky. And when she sets that comb down on the wall, he runs over and grabs it. He thinks, oh, she'll have to ask for it back. That's one way to get her to talk. Fool that Jack is. As soon as he's grabbed the comb, she begins to transform into a banshee. Her limbs all elongate, and she grows these long talons that scrape on the floor. This wind lifts up her hair into a tangled mess, undoing all of her hard work, and she lets out a scream that chills the blood in his veins. This scares the life out of Jack, and he heads for home. Now, Jack was a man who loved a few pints in the pub, and so he had a great big belly out in front of him. But that did not matter, because on that night he would have beaten any man in a race. And as he tore off for his house, he could hear the banshee screaming and scraping her claws on the ground as she pursued him. He gets in the door, he slams it behind him and bolts it shut just as the banshee crashes on into the other side of the door, howling and scratching, trying to get inside. All of this commotion, well, it wakes up his wife. We're quickly losing sympathy for Jack. She bursts into the room and she sees her husband standing there, him stricken with fear. She marches over to him and she slaps him across the face. And she says to him, "What in God's name have you been up to? You'll wake the kids and everyone." And Jack's answer is, she slaps him again. "Speak barely, man. Come on, speak English there, for God's sakes." And he finds the words. He tells her what's happened. He tells her about him trying to compliment the woman on the road and how she transformed into this monster after he took her comb. And of course, his wife, she slaps him again. So poor Jack, he's getting a proper beating now. And his wife is staring at him, demanding an explanation. She tells him, "Look, this is a banshee you've led to our door. Where is the comb now?" Jack looks down at his hand, and he still has the comb. His wife says to him, "You must return it. Open that door and give it back." "I won't." "You will." "I won't." "You will." "I won't." "You will." This goes on until Jack realises he's more afraid of his wife than the banshee. Smart man, Jack. Now, you might say at this point in the story, why doesn't Jack return it by throwing it out the window? Avoid any risk of harm. Well, Jack was a poor man, and back in those days in Ireland, the English never missed an opportunity to tax us. And of course, he spent all of his spare money, his spare few coins, on pints of Guinness down in the pub. So he'd no money left over for the daylight tax. So he'd no option but to open that front door. With his hands shaking, he unlocks the door. Just a crack, he opens it, enough to thrust his arm out and pull it back in the same instance. All he was doing was dropping the comb and pulling his hand back. But as he retrieves it, he feels the banshee's claws scraping on his flesh, marking him. He shuts the door and the screaming outside stops, but he's shook because he knows that if he had left his hand out there for a second longer, the banshee would have taken his hand along with the comb. With dead silence for the rest of the night, he's too frightened to open the door until the next morning when the sun is high in the sky and he unlocks it. He steps outside. It's sunny outside. He looks right, he looks left, he looks up. There's no sign of the banshee. He steps out into the yard and he is sure the coast is clear. He turns to his wife, who's still in the doorway, to call to her to say it's safe to come out. I'm the hero. I've banished the Banshee. It's all safe now. And his jaw drops open when he looks back at the house, because he can see the claw marks of the Banshee on the stone walls and on the wooden door. He knows in that instant that if he hadn't returned the comb when he did, the house would have been torn to pieces and everyone inside. So the moral of the story, and there are 3 in this story: you never pick up something that doesn't belong to you. You never disturb a woman at night. And you always listen to your wife. Guys, that's the tale of the Banshee's comb. And it's your job now to tell anyone you ever meet who spots a comb or a brush on the street, if they're not taking it away for litter, they need to be mindful lest they take the Banshee's comb and she follows them home too. So that's me, guys. Balor Otherworld. Spread the story. I really appreciate all the support. And join me next week when I have a new story for you. If anyone is travelling around Ireland and they're interested in booking me for events, please feel free to contact me by email, on my phone, or on my website. Thank you all and have a great Sunday.